Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacy and Phil Thompson.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacy.
And my name is Phil Thompson. Good to be with you again as we do this podcast, almost a weekly podcast, with a few exceptions. If you have family coming in town, then we don't do it.
That's right.
You have a good time with your family?
I did. It was awesome.
Good deal. You got 4 kids.
That's right.
They're all grown-ups now.
Yeah, when one comes in with his wife, we take time off. So, yeah, actually we were going to visit them, and we decided that maybe a better use of our time and money is have them come visit us. So we paid to have them come see us.
Oh, that was nice. I'm sure they enjoyed that as well. And my son just got his driver's license.
Yes.
So now the fun begins.
Yeah.
You're way ahead of me on that one, so you can brief me later as to what to expect, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we're a tech company that is called JSL Solutions, and we do one of our main deals is really helping churches use technology to reach people, and we do streaming video, we do mobile apps, we do church content management systems and website templates and live greeters for websites. Today, we're going to talk about how to make effective church announcements.
Yes, your favorite topic, right?
This is really a pet peeve of mine, and I really hope that, this may not turn anybody on this morning, but I really would hope that you'd listen to it for at least a while, because church announcements are probably, think about this. When was the last time you heard somebody say, wow, those announcements were just powerful today? Church announcements are kind of they're a necessity, but they're not, they need to be done well.
Yes, and so we're going to walk through a different approach, right?
Yeah, hopefully pick up a few things, maybe some of these you're using here, and it does involve a little bit of technology can be incorporated in this.
So one of the key assumptions, though, that people fall into, or a trap that people fall into, is they feel like if it's important to me or the church leadership,
right,
it should be important to everyone here.
Yeah.
So let's dedicate some time to telling people about it.
Right, and that is not always the case. Sometimes it is. So we're going to go through a few guidelines here that maybe you can look at, and maybe this would help make your announcements more effective. But everybody's under that assumption that you mentioned, Steve. But really, it's time to quit doing announcements, and it's time to start doing next steps.
Yeah, so this is a twist, huh? So,
yeah. Well, that's what you want. You want people to take the next step in whatever area that applies to them. So instead of just announcements are, lots of information, but it doesn't really inspire many people usually. Right. So the next steps, it's a compelling, I guess you would call it a call to action. So your people can respond. They have an opportunity to respond to whatever it is you're communicating.
Right. So this is a different way to look at how to do the announcements. So,
yes. Yeah.
Right.
I speak at my church too. I do announcements, and there's times I substitute and speak for my church. And I'm always big on next steps. If you're going to talk to somebody about whatever it is, you want to give them opportunities to take the next step. It could be a sermon, it could be an announcement, whatever. So that's kind of where I'm at on that whole thing.
So this, as we walk through this, is going to help shape. It's going to filter what you plan on having as announcements or next steps,
right,
and to only those that are going to be compelling that would initiate a response and activity from those.
So the first thing you've got to do here is and I get hit, I'm elder announcement, so I make most of the announcements when I'm not speaking or teaching at my church, and I get hit with all sorts of stuff. But let's talk about a few things here you could do. So the first of all is you've got to come up with some kind of a standard for what's really what needs to be communicated during your services. So you got to come up with a standard for that, okay? So your people they're looking for some help to decide what they need to know and what they need to do. So, and as you said, if you treat everything equally important, and nothing's really that important. So you got to come up with some standards, and they're going to look different for every church community. Every church is going to look a little different. So it's critical, though, to have some framework here, something that's consistent for your church, so you can decide what gets stage time, is what we used to call it at your church, and what won't get stage time. And so, a starting point, we need to look at some things here.
So here's some criteria.
Here's some ideas.
So first is, does it impact 80% of your audience?
I'm real big on this. If it doesn't impact a large percentage of your people, so 80% is what we've got.
So this would rule out any women's ministry, any men's ministry?
Right? Probably, unless you have 80% women in your congregation or 80% men, probably. I mean, again, this is going to be different for everybody. But if it's a small, if it's the underwater basket weaving club, that has 10 people in it, it's not something you want to announce from the stage.
Yeah, right. Or it may be just announcing, if it's women's, it wouldn't be a women's ministry thing. It was, we have XYZ ministry opportunities, check with such and such to get,
And keep in mind, we're talking about announcements from the platform,
right?
From the stage, whatever you want to call it, the pulpit, whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying you can't communicate these things through other avenues.
Right.
I mean, you should, you have to. But we're talking about Sunday morning when you get up in front of people and you're making announcements, or whoever it is, okay? People are there not to hear the announcements.
Yes.
They're here to be inspired, the music, the worship, the teaching, testimonies inspire them, which we can incorporate, by the way, in these announcements. But there's this idea that we, got to read the bulletin to people.
Right. So, so the first criteria or filter is, does it apply to 80% of the audience?
Does it apply to 80%?
So the next one is a direct next step from the teaching that would add value to the audience.
Yeah. And this is something I struggle with a little bit with what we're doing at my church, and that is, I feel like if you're going to get up and give a sermon or message, to really have an impact on people, you got to give them a next step. So if you happen to have an announcement or whatever, is it tying in with what you're talking about for the sermon? Or the message series. Some churches do a series of messages under something, one topic. So is it going to connect into that? Is it going to add value? Is it going to inspire people? Is it a direct next step from the teaching that would add value to the people that are listening to it?
All right.
And this is just some criteria. It might be a little different. All right.
So the third one, is it a key on-ramp to a ministry?
Yeah. So what we mean by that is, I use on-ramps, off-ramps because I live by an interstate, and most people do now. So is what you're leading, is the announcement going to give people an opportunity to get connected to that ministry in a real meaningful way? Is it going to give them a way to get involved, a way to get plugged in, a way to get connected to other people? And that's obviously following these other criteria.
All right. So if you apply these three, this is gonna help you filter out what needs to go in front of the congregation.
It's going to remove a lot of what I call clutter. Okay, not completely, but some of it. All right.
All right. So another step you can take.
All right. So, the first one is creating some kind of a standard for your announcements. The second one is making each next step clear and compelling. I mean, if it's, just because it's worthy of being announced doesn't mean that it's communicated clearly and compellingly. So before you get up to make the announcement, or whoever it is, there's a few questions you need to answer before you do this, before you get up and make an announcement. All right. The first one is the real obvious one. Why should people even care about this announcement? I mean, what relevance is it to them? Why should they care? And so you need to probably incorporate that in the announcement part of it. Here's why you should care. The other one is, don't assume that, as you mentioned earlier, just because it's important to you doesn't mean it's important to everybody else. So, and we have that happen a lot at my church, and I love my church very much, and I'm not trashing it, but there are people that are doing things, and to them, this is hugely important to them, and so it should be for everybody else. Well, That's not always the case.
Yeah, it's tough to put yourself in, out of your,
It is.
put yourself into those positions.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's important. And then, the next point would be, okay, what am I asking people to do here? And that, again, kind of gets into this next step thing. So behind every next step, there's got to be a call to action. There's got to be like, okay, do you want people to sign up? Do you want people to give in a situation here? Do you want people to show up and attend something? So you got to make this clear. You got to make it simple. You've got to communicate in an effective way what you're asking people to do. And your job isn't really over, until you've removed these barriers. Because, unfortunately, I see this a lot in lots of churches, my own experiences, and I'm sure you have too, and many people listening have, and that is we tend to want to lead these people on a rabbit trail. I've got rabbits in my backyard out here, and my dog tries to chase them, and it's just, he's going all over the place, trying to figure out what's next. And that's what happens with people. A lot of times you have an announcement. Well, what do they do next? Where do they go next? And
right.
It becomes really a complicated thing, and it doesn't have to be.
Exactly.
All right. So you got to start with these things before you get up there. And this is the classic journalism thing that I took. It's the who, why, where, what, when. Or maybe who, why, what, and when, and where. And then, the challenging part is that. And then, you've got to do this in a short amount of time, which is another pet peeve of mine. People aren't there to hear the announcements. So you've got to somehow or another figure out a way to incorporate this. And so what this means, and I went over this with your cronies, for a long time, is there's got to be preparation here. I'm mocking your people at your church. I'm sorry, I don't mean to do that. I'm doing that in a loving way. But we talked a lot about this years ago, and that is we can't just walk up and just read announcements. There's got to be some thought. There's got to be some creative effort put into it. And you've got to keep it short in order to do that. I speak at my church 15, 20 times a year because we're all part-time. And so I put a lot of effort into a message that I give, a sermon. And I really do try to put a lot of effort into it. And honestly, when you're making announcements, you need to put a lot of effort and thought beforehand so you're not just getting up there and rambling on. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, makes sense.
Can you hear the passion in my voice?
Yes.
So maybe this doesn't maybe people don't care about that. Anyhow, all right, so let's move on here.
So the third thing you can do is get creative with your methods.
Well, and that's kind of ties into what I was saying earlier about putting a lot of forethought into it. Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to get stuck. And this is the hard part as well. You get stuck sometimes in how you communicate. And so, if you're just telling people the same thing every day, every week, whatever, it becomes a rut and people begin to tune out because we live in a generation now that, wants variety and wants some excitement and spark. So there are some things that you can do. It takes a little bit of effort, but right. It's not that hard to do. One of them is video.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the, I don't know what the rules are. You may remember this, but you remember X percent of what you read. You remember X percent of what you view. You remember a larger percentage of what you actually do. Uh-huh. So I was just thinking about what are some of the announcements that I remember from my church, and it jumps back to when we were doing video announcements.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we had a couple of people that were really creative and actually pretty funny on camera.
Yeah.
And so I find this is a great way to do things because you can go through, and if it doesn't work out real well, you can say, well, let's shoot that again.
Right.
Or you've got to really think through, okay, I've got 45 seconds, so you work out a script and you can get this thing just really nice, and then you can edit it after you've done your shoot and just make a really compelling announcement that people are going to walk away and remember.
Now, this will take a little bit of time, and it takes a little bit of effort. It takes some thinking in advance, and usually with a lot of churches out there, the announcement part of your service is usually the least amount of energy that people put into it and think about it.
Right.
You plan your service out, And then, oh yeah, we need to do announcements. Who's going to do announcements this week? Bill, can you do announcements, Bill? All right, Bill can't do it. Let's have Sharon do it or whatever, and it's kind of the last thing you do a lot of times. And what I'm trying to say this morning or today is it shouldn't be the last thing. It should be a very important part of your presentation, especially if you're trying to get people to be involved and do things. You want to have video. And, today, I mean, my goodness, today with smartphones, you could shoot a video from your iPhone or your Android phone. You can even edit it from that, and you can do something that doesn't have to be super, super spiffy, but it can, if your lighting's good, your audio's good, you can put together a nice little deal within a short period of time.
And another advantage is you can use it in church during the services, and you can stick it on your website too, so you can use it in multiple places.
Yeah. So video, I mean, today with the tools of video and the cameras out there, it's really easy to do that. You just need to put a little bit of thought into it and make sure things are good. So video is a great way to get creative with your announcements.
Yes. So another way to be creative is use this mention approach.
Yeah.
Rather than dedicating, okay, Bobby's going to get up and do announcements, it's going to, the pastor's speaking about a particular topic, they can mention how to take next steps as they're talking about that topic.
And it needs to be short, and again, the thing about what I like to do is if you use a program or a bulletin, you've probably got your announcements in there, hopefully. You can always say, notice in your program that we're going to start, this may not be a good example, but we're going to start doing church fantasy football, It's going to start. We're going to do draft night next Monday at 6 p.m. Check your program for more information and your connection card. And this is another piece of announcements that I don't think I have in the notes here, but I'm real big on giving people an opportunity, an easy way to sign up for something. So if you have some kind of a card in your program, they can whip it out. If you got pens and stuff handy, they can put something on their connection card that they're interested in or they want more information on or whatever, and then they can just drop it in the offering. And boom, it's done. Okay? Some churches go over to the foyer or the lobby and fill out a form. Okay, you can do that, but that's making people go through another step or jump through another hoop. Whereas if they just had the card right there in front of them, they can get the details from the program. You don't have to go through all the nitty-gritty details. It's there in your program. Mark your connection card you're interested, and away we go. Let's move on to something else.
Right. And you mentioned it as part of, the example we have here is, say you're doing baptisms. You're doing the baptisms. You can mention, if you're interested in being baptized, check the box on your connection card and drop it in the basket, and we'll get in touch with you.
We'll get in touch with you, give you more information, tell you what that means, and all that stuff. So that's an important thing. So again, as we talk about creative methods here, video, short mentions, connection card, and then story. And this is going to take a little longer, but it's nice to have it if you have a certain amount of time. Share a story, something that's a compelling story. Maybe someone in your church that's been impacted by something you're announcing, something you're sharing about. So maybe if it is, we're going to have baptisms next Sunday, and either have somebody share a short little testimony on video, or maybe if they're confident enough, they can be up there with you and they can share something for 30 seconds on how baptism really affected them.
Right.
Some kind of a story, hearing a personal story of change, somebody's life has changed. It really makes a real big impact on people. And again, what I want to remind people about is when we're talking about announcements here, we're really talking about encouraging people to take the next step somewhere.
Yeah. And plus there's an element of the satisfied customer. Yeah. You've got somebody sharing a story that can talk about how they got involved with something and what it did in their life.
Yeah. So if you've got, if 80% of the church is involved in underwater basket weaving, you can make that announcement and you can have somebody from underwater basket weaving share how that has really impacted their life.
Yes. And they too can sign up.
Exactly. All right. So let's move on here as we talk about, and by the way, you can always give us some feedback on this. We'll give you an email address here at the end, but we'd love to hear from our people on some of this. All right. So next one is, and this is another pet peeve of mine when we talk about, getting creative here, we've got to point people to a connection point or a connection hub. it's got to be, you've got to get them to the right place. So, things like baptism or volunteering for something or small groups, membership, you got to point them to an area where they can actually take that next step. The connection card to me is a good deal, but maybe there's an information desk.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that there would be, you would do a short mention, if you want to sign up for baptism, to, go over to the information desk, you can get more info there.
Yeah, and there are some people, hey, I want information now. So, they can mark the connection card, but maybe they want to talk to somebody specifically about it.
Right.
So, okay, do you have a hub? Do you have a place in your church facility where they can talk to somebody, a real person that actually has a good understanding of what it is? And some kind of a deal. We used to have one at your church. I guess you guys still have it, but it's what was it called? It was called an information center.
Yeah, information center. Yep.
So those kind of things I think are important. But if you can change the culture of your church when it comes to announcements, you'll find things much more smoothing, but they'll be running more smoothly. Your services won't be taking up a bunch of time to make announcements that half the people don't care about. You can streamline things and still be much more effective.
Right. So changing the culture, really changing the theme of announcements to helping somebody take next steps.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. And I think you can do that. And so, again, I'm saying that the announcements part of your service, whenever you do that, and we didn't get into when to do that. There's all sorts of ideas on when to do that. But I'm saying that it should be very important. Very important. We think the music, the worship's important. Yes, it is. The message, the sermon's important. Yes, it is. But I think your announcement part is maybe not equally important. Maybe not. But I think if you're encouraging people to get involved and take steps for them to grow spiritually, to help your church, to help your community, I think that's very important.
Right.
Maybe more important than the other things we just mentioned.
Right. This is the on-ramp for getting them into ministry.
That's my point. And I'll go down fighting for that because I think it's important. But anyhow, that's Matt. So we'd love to hear your feedback on this. Maybe we're out to lunch. Maybe we missed something. Let us know. What's the email, Steve?
support@StreamingChurch.tv.
Send us an email, or you can always go online to one of our many websites and chat with us during business hours. We've got StreamingChurch.tv. We've got ChurchAppLive.com, which is our mobile apps. We've got, what else we got? MyFlock.com.
Yes.
And we've got greeter.church.
That is it.
Which is actually a website. And you can chat during business hours. So we're in Arizona. So depending on when you're listening to this, we're on Mountain Time. So 3 hours different than the East Coast. Anyhow. All right. Anything else we need to talk about before we get out of here?
That should do it.
All right. Well, folks, we appreciate you spending some time with us. And if we can help you in any way with technology or even some church-related stuff, Steve and I and others around here have been involved in church work for a long time. And so if we can help you in any way, we'd be pleased to do that. And you can contact us with that information we just mentioned. Have yourself a very good day, a great evening, and we will catch you next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.